Welcome to Living Well with MS, the podcast from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, celebrating its 10th year of serving the MS community. I'm your host, Jeff Alex. The goal of our organisation and this podcast is to inform, support and empower people with MS to lead full and happy lives. We're excited you could join us for this new episode. Make sure to check out this episode's show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast or on whichever podcast platform you use to tune into our programme. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels or leave a review wherever you tune into our podcast. Have questions or ideas to share? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org, or you can reach out to me directly on Twitter @JeffAlex. We'd love to hear from you. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to Living Well with MS on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And now, let's meet our guest for this episode. Joining us on this episode of the Living Well with MS podcast is Chris Cerillo. Chris was diagnosed with MS in 2017, and that's when she really decided to live her life how she wanted to. It really drove home, with the spectrum of types and prognoses, that anything can truly happen in life. We never know. So soon after this huge upheaval into her life, she began to look at both what she had to do now, like eating healthier and exercising, and what she wanted to do. Chris re-evaluated her life in every way, which was incredibly hard, but so worth it. She started with the happiness she had suppressed for a long time. So many things have happened in the past 4.5 years after diagnosis that she became a different person. She is still the same in some ways, of course, a crazy cat person and a Special Olympics volunteer, for instance, but she has changed it fundamentally. The way she views life, with a joy in the day-to-day, making sure that those she loves know it, and it's now her core. Chris honestly can say that she is glad to be diagnosed with MS. As crazy as that sounds, it's true, because of all the epiphanies that it has granted her. So welcome to the programme, Chris, and thank you so much for joining us on Living Well with MS.
Thank you for having me.
So this month, the content theme is sharing your story. So with that in mind, could you tell us a bit about yourself and your life in Connecticut?
Yeah. So just for reference, Connecticut's like a super tiny state in the United States, and we're about an hour and a half from Manhattan. But it's a great state. I really do like it a lot. I'm actually from upstate New York, so that's also about an hour and a half from here.
So is upstate New York, is that the bit that's not the city of New York?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Sorry.
Once you're out of the city, no, it's a huge state. It's kind of complicated. But yeah, I'm from Hudson Valley. I moved here in 2011, and except for a stint in Manhattan during the pandemic, unfortunately. Came back, and I really like it here. It's pretty awesome. I work in fundraising at a nonprofit, and I love my work. I mean, a lot of people can't say that. I feel privileged to be able to say that. But yeah, and I have a bunch of really awesome friends that are, family to me here, which is great because most of my family actually lives down south now. They moved from upstate New York to North Carolina and Florida. So they text me regularly. It's 15 degrees here right now. And they text me and they're like, it's 50 degrees where I am. So, but here, despite the cold, it's a pretty awesome
So when you
state.
say 15 degrees, you're talking Fahrenheit, aren't you?
Yes, Fahrenheit.
So that's way below zero.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. 15 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm very American-centric. I have to work my way out of that. Yeah, and I volunteer a lot as much as I can around here with the Special Olympics and like doing dog rescue transports. Really, anything that I can do to help out, I try to give back as much as possible. But yeah, it's
so the
pretty
Special
great
Olympics,
here.
is that like the Paralympics?
Yes, yeah. So folks with special needs, autism, Down syndrome, things like that. Yeah.
And let's get some insight into the MS side of things. So when you were diagnosed and a bit about the diagnosis and how you dealt with that.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed. I had to sit down and think about this actually, 2017, which sounds like so long ago. I guess technically it is long. It was 4.5 years. But the summer of 2017. So before I was diagnosed, I had a bunch of like weird different symptoms that just like didn't amount to anything in particular. Like I had a lot of tests done. I had, ANAs done. They were testing for lupus and this autoimmune disease and that autoimmune disease because I had, joint pain and I was just generally not feeling well. And that had been for a couple of years prior to the diagnosis, and they just kind of gave up. They're like, we don't know. We don't know what's wrong with you, which I think happens a lot with autoimmune issues. But in 2017, I started to feel like burning sensations in my body, and I was like, this is different and weird. In particular, I was washing the dishes one day, and it felt like my hands were burning. I'm like, oh my God, like, why is this water so hot all of a sudden? So I stepped back and like a few minutes later, I'm like, still burning. And then I realized it was burning from inside and not outside. And I was like, there's something going on here. So to be 100% honest, after so many years of knowing something was wrong and then coming to the realization of like, oh, this could actually be something. Like this could be MS. Of course, you go on Google. You're going to Google whatever's happening. Some like burning sensation, nerve issues, right? Pop up. But a few days after the dishwashing incident, I realized that my right eye wasn't seeing as well. And I was like, that's weird. But I had had glasses since I was like 9. I'm like, my eyes just, in general, I just don't see very well. So I'm like, that's not a huge problem. It felt like all of a sudden it felt like there was like a sunglass lens on my right eye, and I also couldn't see red very well, and red is my favorite color. So I like everything's red around me. And I'm like, why is red super dark now? That's odd. So I called into my eye doctor. It was the weekend. So I left her a message, and I think it was Sunday. But I was at work Monday morning at 8 a.m. and I get a call, and they're like panicked. And they're like, you need to come in. You need to come in ASAP, like leave work. So I did. I like told my boss, and she's like, okay, yeah, sounds like an emergency. So I go in, and there's just a general panic happening, which I didn't realize until afterwards. I think they thought that I was having a stroke because it's just sudden, like, why is her eye not working? So we had a bunch of tests done while I was there. And she told me at the end of the visit, she's like, yeah, I think you need to see a neurologist. And because I had been Googling, I was like, do you think it's optic neuritis? And she's like, I think it is. So I made the neurologist appointment for like a week later and went in, and he's still my neurologist, actually. He's great. Shout out to Dr. Hassani in New Haven. But so I went in, and then a few days later got my MRI, and he interpreted it, and he told me, like, look, here's 6 different lesions on your brain. Like, it's pretty safe to say that this is MS. So, yeah, I think originally, like I said, I was like, great, this is the diagnosis. I feel vindicated, like so happy to have this answer. And then I did more thinking and more researching and realized that it's seen as, one of the worst illnesses to have by the general public. Like I saw it compared to like cancer. It was like cancer's the number 1 worst thing to have, and then MS was like number 2, which is scary when you're first diagnosed to read that.
I didn't come across that, and I'm quite glad I didn't come across that.
Yeah, maybe it's an American thing. I don't know, but
there is an element with
terrible.
Cancer's going to go one way or the other, isn't it? It's. So, I mean, I know people who are completely in the clear now and have been for a long time, and but then equally, it could kill you very, very quickly. So
right.
We're kind of in that middle ground, aren't we? It's like, yeah, you're going to have it forever.
Anything could happen. Yeah.
There's not going to be any sort of like, we've cleared you of this.
But
equally, we're not going to give you 3 months to live. So
Right. I mean, I guess if you're like primary progressive, you could be, you know, in much quicker time frame of deterioration. But I think, you know, in general, yeah, I just heard a lot of people calling it like the wheelchair disease, and like you're gonna end up super disabled. And I mean, I think honestly, people talk about a wheelchair like it's the worst possible thing, when in reality, like lots of people live full lives in wheelchairs or with, you know, canes or walking sticks. So I learned all that later. I learned that perspective later on. But initially, yeah, it was freaked out once I got over my happiness of a diagnosis.
And so if other people are newly diagnosed, would you have any tips for them, how you deal with it when you're newly diagnosed?
Yeah, I think you're going to run through, you know, a bunch of emotions at first. Maybe not the same way that I did, but it's definitely going to hit you. And you kind of have to let it hit you, right? I mean, don't just hold on to like extreme positivity. Like it's a real disease. It's something you're going to have to live with the rest of your life, like you were saying, Jeff. And, you know, like let that sink in. Feel your feelings, like as my therapist would say. But don't panic too much, and make sure that you do some research and look into OMS, because that honestly, like Overcoming MS book has become like my Bible to live by. Like whenever I'm not feeling well, I'm like, let me check in and see what I should be adjusting here. But reading through it when I was like first diagnosed was really, really important for me. I like to have some sort of control over my life, and I didn't feel like I had it until I found OMS, and I was like, oh, I can have power over what happens to me.
And did you come across OMS straight away, or was it a while after your diagnosis?
I was lucky. So my partner at the time actually did this research, like even before I was diagnosed, when I was like having burning sensations, he was looking it up and came across OMS and like ordered me the book and everything. And it was pretty soon after that I was reading into it and looking into it. And I kind of did it slowly, because I was balancing that with all the millions of pamphlets that your neurologist gives you. You know, I was like, this medication and that medication. It was like just too much information at once. So it was great that he purchased that, and he like kind of gave me a synopsis of like, hey, you can do this and that and this. To make sure you stay healthy. So yeah, I think my tip probably to like cut down on the panic. If you have people that are super close to you, you can ask them to do some research for you. And most people that are close to you want to help. So if you give them a task, they're probably going to take it on. That would be my main tip.
Yeah, I think if you try to do everything yourself, then that's and I think that's kind of a natural thing to want to do everything and say, okay, I'm not going to let this affect me at all. But sometimes you need to rely on people, and people are happy to help usually, I think. Right. And I think it's not unusual what you said about that your partner actually introduced you to Overcoming MS. That was the case with me, and it has been with other guests as well. And I think maybe that's because they want to do something, and so they're doing research because they can do that, and they're like, okay, I can, and then they come across like various things, and then say, how have you tried Overcoming MS? Have you heard of this? And,
yeah, they want to help you and they don't know how.
And then later on, maybe like now, my wife kind of knows where, what is helpful, like because we've been doing it for years. But at first, it's like, well, I don't know how I can help you, but so that was a way she really did help me. Yeah.
And then you learn how like what kind of things can help you. You can communicate that to your loved ones and be like, hey, if I'm overdoing it, if we're out for a hike and I start moving slowly, like the cold weather really affects me. I know everybody says the hot weather, and like hot weather too, unfortunately, also affects me. But if I'm out like for a long walk with a friend and I'm like body's not moving as well, they can say like, let's cut it off, let's go home, and get you feeling better. But yeah, I think initial stages, you got to figure that out.
Yeah, no, I'm one of the one. Cold weather's good for me. I've always been into really outdoor sports, and the last one that I sort of stopped doing was snowboarding. So since having MS, I've done 2 snowboarding trips, and I can do that because I can stay cold. Whereas like Mediterranean trip in the summer is much harder for me. Right.
I'm not going to go down south and visit my family in the summer. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. No July trips to Florida.
The problem is my family love it, so I still am. I have done trips, and we've been to Thailand, and we've been to Costa Rica, and we're planning to go to Sardinia when they finally let us travel again.
Right.
But I know I won't be doing much. I'm going to be by the beach, and I'll go to the sea and cool down.
Yeah, don't overdo it. We learn. We learn as we go.
And so, have you found differences since you've been doing Overcoming MS? Has it made a difference?
It definitely has. I find, I was a vegan when I found OS, so like I was already kind of there, but I was like a junk food vegan. So I had to switch into like, actual plant-based diet and eating a lot of greens. And when I do that, I feel better than when I eat, frozen pizzas and chips and soda. It's crazy how much of a difference it actually makes. But it's true. It's true. If I exercise, I feel better. Like it's good for the whole system, right? So it's good for your brain. If any depression's like creeping up, like go exercise, go eat some good food, go do, hang out with friends when it's safe to do so. But OMS is definitely,
There's been a lot of articles because we have a thing, I don't think it's international, called Veganuary, where they try and encourage people to be vegan for January. Mm-hmm. Is it a thing everywhere?
It is a thing here too.
Okay,
yep.
Yeah. So, and there's been some articles about this saying actually being vegan isn't necessarily healthy. And then when you read these articles, it's because there is a lot more veganism in this country now, and so you see a lot of stuff in supermarkets.
Here too.
With vegan fast food, really, like processed vegan food.
Right.
and it's not so much the being vegan, it's the plant-based whole food, isn't it? It's like if you are,
there's a difference.
And that is more effort because you are going to be chopping up vegetables and cooking. Yes. You're not going to be putting stuff in.
It's kind of annoying, to be honest. Yeah. I don't like cooking. I don't enjoy it, but I do it. You figure out like workarounds. Like I make kale chips all the time. I just put nutritional yeast on kale and just put it in the oven until it becomes kale chips.
Yeah.
And there you go. Or make a salad. Super easy.
But actually, there is an element of it being delicious as well because you are actually cooking freshly made food. So that's
true.
And that's kind of
I feel proud of myself, but
yeah. I mean, I think there's an element that I think if you just give up meat, is it really a massive benefit over? I think the benefit comes from personally, I just think the whole food side of it, the actually eating. Proper food.
Yeah. I mean, I became a vegan originally for animal welfare reasons. I worked in animal shelters for a really long time and interned on farms and stuff. So I was like, this makes sense for me. But being an animal welfare vegan literally means you could eat anything that's vegan. There's a new vegan pizza like every week at my store or down the road. It feels like there's just like new options all the time.
So in the States, I don't know about Connecticut, but places I've been to, trying to order a pizza without cheese on it, they just say, because I pizza's a real go-to for me because it's just so easy because you just think, okay, I'm just, and actually in Italy they do pizza without cheese as one of the not always, but it's easy to get. And I'll go like Seattle and say, and I'm actually going along. There's a place called Mod Pizza, which I don't know if that's national, but you basically choose what you want along the sort of when you're ordering it. So I'll have the red sauce as I go across, and then you say, "Oh, no cheese," and they say, "Oh, are you vegetarian or vegan, or are you vegan?" And I said, "Yeah, just I'm vegan." And they say, "Oh no, we have vegan cheese." And I said, "No, I just don't want any cheese." And they're like, "But it's vegan."
Shocked.
I'm like, whatever that is, that's not food." So,
it's not what I want. Yeah.
Pizza without cheese is really nice. But anyway.
It is. I gotta say, I've learned to like it over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think anywhere the US is cheese is like, it's almost like ordering a pizza with no base or something to say with no cheese. It has, otherwise it's not pizza.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are weirded out.
Yeah. So
possible.
did you have any problems adopting OMS? You said you were vegan already, but what were the main obstacles to adopt the lifestyle?
I would say probably trying to be stress-free or as stress-free as possible. Meditation has never worked for me. I've tried so many times. I've tried with a Headspace app, and I've tried with all kinds of YouTube. I went to a meditation class. My brain can't do it. I think it's just the way I'm wired. My brain just will not calm down. So I have learned other ways of dealing with stress. Number one would probably be yoga. Because I found that it's like meditation in motion. And as long as my body's doing something, I can calm down long enough to, slow down and be less stressed. So yoga and running has become a huge stress-free thing for me. It's just staying in motion.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. There's a distinction with mindfulness and meditation, that actually you can do almost anything mindfully, but you don't. Obviously meditation is mindful, but equally you can run mindfully. And so I used to run a lot, and you are literally thinking about what you're doing, and running or swimming. And I'm certainly always thinking about my technique and am I doing it right? And that's essentially a mindful activity.
You can't think about anything else, right?
No, and you can. So I think a lot of sport can actually be quite mindful. You don't have, and actually the sort of meditation experts say this. They say you can do everything mindfully. You can prepare food mindfully. You don't have to just be thinking, I've got to do a half an hour meditation. You can live.
I've seen that. Yeah.
I think people who do it really well, if you sort of say a Buddhist monk or something, they're kind of living their whole life mindfully.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean they're meditating the whole time.
I've definitely tried to do that. I do trail running, and you really can't think about anything else. You're there's a big rock. How am I going to navigate around that? I need to stay upright. So yeah, that's what I would say. Being stress-free just in general. Any person who works full-time, good luck. You have deadlines, you have things that you have to do, and you have to be an adult. You have to take care of your animals or your children if you have them. It's life isn't easy. So being stress-free for my Emma, I know when I'm super stressed, I can feel more burning sensations or more tingling, and I'm I need to calm down.
Yeah, I think
so it's
stress
is a check.
It's the one that you get instantly, don't you? It's for me, if I get stressed, I can just feel symptoms coming on straight away. Yeah,
totally. It's almost like a good thing that my body can tell me to slow down.
Yeah, because you can then fix it quickly as well, can't you? Right. So talking of stress, you've got sort of experience with dealing with big life decisions and how that affects your MS. So in your case, you decided to come out about your sexuality publicly. So how did you manage to deal with that? Sorry?
I said I publicly. It's I'm a star.
So how did you manage the stress of that and sort of staying calm through what must have been a sort of traumatic time?
Yeah, that was rough. That was probably the roughest patch of my life. And being diagnosed with MS is really what catapulted everything else. It was within a few months of being diagnosed with MS that I realized I was gay, and it was time to come out and like end my, 7-year relationship and move out on my own. And it was a lot. How did I learn to deal with stress in that moment? I think I really leaned into just exercise and yoga and like talking to friends and therapy all at once. It was like, I have to take care of myself right now because this is a lot. Being diagnosed just made me like reevaluate everything in my life. And because you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't know. It could be, you might not be able to run, or you might have less vision in the future, like anything. My other eye could get optic neuritis, and make me less, capable of seeing. You don't know. That's the truth for everybody. But I feel like once you're diagnosed with a big disease, I guess I'll say like MS, it really puts it front and center that you need to live your life now because you don't know. So with that in mind, I was doing a lot of yoga and a lot of thinking and journaling, and it actually like came to me like while I can really remember it vividly, like being in a yoga class and my brain just being like, you're gay, you're gay, you need to come out. So I did, and it was a lot to have to call my close people, my friends and my family with the MS diagnosis, and then like a month later be like, hey, I'm also a lesbian, by the way. It was a lot for sure. I think without close friends and like a close network, I think that's also mentioned a lot in OMS, of like having your support system is so important. And it would have been so much harder if I didn't have close friends and family that were like, oh, okay, like makes sense to both of the things that I had to tell them. Like if I didn't have that, it would have been a lot harder. So I know I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky for that, just leaning on social supports and being in therapy and kind of, I think it helped. It helped to already be started on OMS by the time I came out, because I had already learned like these are the things I need to do for my health. So another stressor, let's keep going. Let's keep up,
So would you say if people have got, because there's all sorts of different major stressful things. I mean, people with MS as well, maybe that it's caused them to have a major change in their career. But equally, right, they might have bereavement, or they could, there's all sorts of big things happen in life. So dealing with those sort of things, would you say that it is that friendship group, or is there sort of specific things you think are particularly useful to deal with big traumatic decisions and changes?
Yeah, I think it's everything that I mentioned: the people, the learning how to care for yourself, therapy, exercise. But I also think it's like your perspective on life. That's really what's helped me along, and really what makes me like enjoy every day is just literally doing and saying what I want to do and say. I always think like you're gonna die either way, right? So why not just do it? Like, I think it's a Lucille Ball quote where she says, "I'd rather regret something I did than something I didn't." And so that's really how I live my life. And it's going to suck and it's going to hurt for weeks, months, maybe even years when you decide to change your life. But the other side of it is just like so beautiful and so worth living that I'm really glad, as hard as it was, I'm glad that I'm on this side of it.
And so has there been, apart from, I mean, there's obvious positives for you because you're living life as you want, but in terms of your like family and friendship group and things like that, has there been positives to that side of things as well, where not the obvious positives, but in your life in general, has there been positives to making those big decisions?
Positives, I think coming out with both things, MS and being gay, really like changed a lot of my relationships and made them closer, because it was like, I need to tell you this difficult thing. And oh yeah, you're still here. You know, you're still like rooting for me, and you're like part of my circle. So yeah, it definitely increased the friendships that I have, and like family members too. Like it just encouraged us like all to be more honest with ourselves and with each other, which I think is so important.
I think there's an element of polarizing, like it really shows people to either be really good friends, or maybe they're not the friends you thought they were. And so if they're not prepared to accept sort of slight changes in me because of MS, then maybe they weren't as good a friend as they thought they were. But then some of the friends you just think, I didn't realize. I mean, so I've had sort of infusions in hospital and stuff, and it's the other end of the county. It's a long way for the hospital where it is. But some of the friends who came to visit me were not necessarily the ones I thought. And I was like, wow, you've actually gone out of your way to do that just to keep me company. And you're like, in a way, you've become a much better friend. You've actually shown yourself to be a much kinder person than I necessarily realized. So it can be really positive, I think, in some ways.
Yeah. It's taught me to ask for help sometimes too. Like I'm not good at all about that, like asking for help. But since they like know about the MS and know I have limitations, and they're sticking around, sometimes I can be like, hey, you know, not feeling good. We had snow last night. This is a good example. And my friend, she was out and about. I don't know what she was doing, but she lives a couple of streets over. And I'm like, hey, can you put my windshield wipers up on my car? Because it's going to snow. And she's like, no problem. I didn't want to go all the way downstairs because I'm like, I am so drained. Because I've been sick lately. And my MS has been like acting up at the same time. Like, wonderful. But, you know, she was like, no problem. And then texted me like, all done, you know. And it's little things like that that just... Or getting like IV prednisone for a while there. I had to do it, I think I've done it 3 times so far. When my MS has been flaring, it was earlier on in my diagnosis, not lately. But yeah, friends just being totally willing to be there with you and just like sit in the room while you're getting an infusion and like read a book. That's incredible support. It really is.
And one thing we're to ask is how you live life to the fullest as someone with MS.
I think it has to do with just not letting MS stop me, and almost in a way like letting it fuel me. Because like I said, with that diagnosis, I was like, oh God, my whole life is changing. But I'm just going to let it change, and I'm going to do what I want. You know, it's already scary, but it's sort of like a looming threat of MS. But I'm just kind of like turning it around and being like, oh, well, this is not my main focus of my life. Like if I'm going to describe myself in a paragraph, MS probably is not even going to be in the paragraph at all, if maybe a footnote. So it's like, it's there, but it's not going to hold me back from what I want to do, because if it did, I'm going to have serious regrets in my life. I have a literal bucket list though. Like it's literally like this small book that I have, and I don't know where I got it from.
You actually have it written down. It's not just in your head.
It's a real thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I add to it all the time, and I cross things off it all the time. And it just makes me focus on life. Like we have to do the things we do as adults. We got to work. We got to pay bills. But then what comes next for me is like, what do I want to do? Like, what cool thing can I do in my life? Because maybe MS will get me, quote unquote, in the future. Anything could get us, right? We could get hit by a bus. But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on enjoying my life while I can.
And so what would you say to someone who's thinking, well, I'm not sure whether I do that and whether I go on that big trip or whether I do this move house or make this change? You know, what would you say to encourage people to to make that leap?
I think it's like a calculated decision, right? So like I always do the pros and cons. Like I want to go to Italy, but then there's the thought of like, how much is that going to cost? When can I actually do it? So it's like a nice balancing. So list everything out, and then if you got to realize, like, if fear is the only thing holding you back, you have to do it. Like that's my rule. Like if the only thing that's making me not do this thing is because I'm afraid to do it, forget it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to plow through. And it's a good way. It's a good way to live. Just like ask yourself that question. If I wasn't afraid, what would I do?
And so you mentioned your bucket list. So as a final question, could I ask, what else is on your bucket list for a full life? What's a big bucket list?
So many things. There's so many pages.
You're not going to win the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, but that's.
I mean, there's some things like that I'm just like, I'm not going to put that on the list. But you never know, really. Let's see, what is on my bucket list? I think one of the big ones is I want to buy a little house in the woods and adopt an old dog. That's been like my long time plan. And I would say, just because you never know with MS, like one floor in my house. But it's a big future plan. I also, like I said, I actually really do want to go to Italy. My grandfather's from there. And so I'm like, I would really love to see it, in a post-COVID world, I guess. But there's also a bunch of little stuff on there that I can tick off in day-to-day life. So it's been great. Yeah. What's on your bucket list?
Like you say, I don't really think of a bucket list as a sort of small things, but maybe I should actually think of having like big and little things.
It's really fun.
There's like sort of things, the things that I'd like to do are things that are getting back things that I had before, like climbing. I was going to say a mountain. Our mountains are not as big as your mountains; they're quite small.
But still impressive.
But yeah, these are things that I used to run up. There's one, the highest mountain in Wales. It used to be between where my parents separated, and between where they lived was one of the routes was basically past this mountain. And it's a sort of, normally people like go up and down in a day, but I was doing a lot of mountain running and stuff at the time, so I'd kind of just think, I'm going to do that in a couple of a few hours. I'm going to run up and down it. Now, just if I could get up that mountain now, that would be such a major achievement. And I don't know if it's achievable or not, but it's something I can kind of like have out there as something I could possibly one day, if I got a bit better, or or even whether it involved like help and I did it like I've got sort of an off-road e-trike thing. Even if I did it with that would still be like quite an achievement.
Yeah,
or, those sort of things. Like, could I just push myself a bit further to do these sort of things?
Right. So that's the question.
Yeah, but I like the idea of having like the smaller things as well. Could I like next week do something like not a major thing, but yeah, just having like targets. I think are a good thing, aren't they? It's good to do that.
I put like axe throwing on my list. I crossed it off a few months ago for my friend's birthday, but it was just like kind of a little thing that I always wanted to do it, and it was like super fun.
Sorry, what was that axe throwing?
Like that, or an exercise class. Axe throwing, yeah.
Okay, that's a thing where I live now. They've now.
I was gonna say, I don't know if it's big there.
It wasn't a year ago, but now there's this axe throwing place that I'm just really tempted to throw axes.
You put it on the list. Yeah, it's super fun. It's dangerous, kind of, but it's super fun.
Yeah, but everyone's standing at sort of one side, aren't they, and throwing them the other way.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. If you do it right, it's not dangerous.
Okay.
Crossed it off. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. And just having that idea of sort of journaling as well, and having a list of things and ticking off things. Is good. Okay.
It's a good life.
Excellent. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us, Chris Cerillo.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. Do you have questions about this episode or ideas about future ones? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you'd like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. To learn more about Overcoming MS and its array of free content and programs, including webinars, recipes, exercise guides, OMS circles, our global network of community support groups, and more, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. While you're there, don't forget to register for our monthly e-newsletter so you can stay informed about the podcast and other news and updates from Overcoming MS. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time.